This video is sponsored by Babbel. When model pilot Lieutenant Viktor Belenko failed to return to the Chuguyevka airbase after a training sortie on September 6, 1976, his superiors were puzzled. They believed he had likely crashed into the waves after his jet failed, but the Soviet Air Defense Forces chiefs eventually moved on. Unbeknownst to them, the well-behaved Belenko was already on his way to a new life with his jet in tow. As the Soviet aircraft suddenly appeared out of the clouds near the city of Hakodate, the Japanese Air Force officers could not believe their eyes, especially when the sizable jet with red stars landed on their runway. This was no ordinary jet. It was the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25, the most feared and mysterious warplane in the West, and it was now in the hands of the enemy. Der Himmel ist die Grenze. The sky's the limit. When bringing you the most fascinating stories about global air forces that we can find, we often explore many first-hand primary source documents in languages such as German, Russian, and others. We also pull quotes, names, and places that we want to share with you as accurately as possible. As some of you native speakers have pointed out, we still have a lot to learn. That's why we enjoy using the Babbel Learning app. With interactive lessons, podcasts, games, and even live classes, the Babbel team uses state-of-the-art technology that will have you speaking another language in just 3 weeks. In contrast to other apps, Babbel's lessons are designed by real language experts, and you'll learn valuable words and phrases for your specific needs and goals, instead of generic ones you'll never get to use. In addition to German and Russian, Babbel offers a total of 14 languages to choose from. All of us at Dark Skies have studied a second language at some point, and Babbel makes it easy to enhance and practice our knowledge. Right now, Dark Skies subscribers get an exclusive offer of up to 60% off a Babbel subscription by clicking on the link in the description and signing up today. Viel Glück. Good luck. Pilot Belenko. On September 6, 1976, Lieutenant Viktor Belenko arrived at a briefing meeting to review that day's flight plans. Belenko was based at the Soviet Air Defense Chuguyevka Air Base in Primorsky Krai, the Russian region nearest to the Sea of Japan and only 400 miles away from the enemy nation. That day, several of the squadron's aircraft were set to fly east over the sea to meet up with Soviet Navy ships. The ships would then launch target drones so that the warplanes could practice with their missiles. Feigning attention, Belenko sat motionless while carefully planning his own mission, calculating times, speed, distance, fuel use, and potential obstacles. During a subsequent routine physical exam to ensure he was in good shape for the mission, Belenko blamed his high pulse and blood pressure on an exhausting morning workout. Joining his fellow pilots, Belenko then boarded his MiG-25, one of the most powerful fighter jets in the world. Change of plans. Born just after World War II, Belenko had been a model Soviet citizen his entire life, joining the military service at a young age and qualifying as an elite fighter pilot with the Soviet Air Force. Still, the 29-year-old had grown disillusioned with his own fractured personal life and with the Soviet regime, so he had started questioning whether the Americans were as evil as the communist regime constantly suggested. Thus, he planned to escape aboard his MiG-25. Shortly after taking off with his fellow pilots, Belenko broke formation. Within a few minutes, he was flying his unarmed MiG-25 with a full tank of gas over the ocean waves, heading straight towards Japan while staying as low as 100 feet to evade both the Soviet and Japanese radars. Once he was deep enough into Japanese airspace, Belenko took up the aircraft to 20,000 feet. His plan was to be noticed by their intelligence. Flying by memory and guesswork, the Soviet pilot actually intended to reach Chitose Air Base. Still, low fuel forced him to land at the nearest available runway. Belenko suddenly spotted one, but it was too short, and the asphalt ran out as he performed the landing maneuvers. The jet then plowed through hundreds of feet of soil before finally coming to a halt. The pilot then fired 2 warning shots before slowly climbing out of the cockpit as motorists on the road near the airport began to gather around such a strange sight. Minutes later, Flight Lieutenant Viktor Ivanovich Belenko of the Soviet Air Defense Forces made an important announcement. He wished to defect. However, Belenko was not at Chitose Air Base, nor at an embassy. Instead, he was in the Japanese provincial airport of Hakodate, the capital city of Oshima Sub-Prefecture. As the airport officials finally reached him, they realized they were dealing with a defection and the surrender of a Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25, the most secretive aircraft the Soviet Union had ever built. The most feared aircraft in the world. The Mikoyan MiG-25 was one of the Soviet Union's closest guarded secrets. Introduced in early 1970, the jet was built in response to a series of American warplanes recently brought into service, such as the F-108 fighter plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, and the massive B-70 bomber. The model, which NATO called Foxbat, was first spotted that same year by spy satellites, which captured images of the new aircraft being tested in secret. An enormous fighter plane, the West's most significant concern regarding the design was its large swept-back wings. At the time, U.S. intelligence knew virtually nothing about the new aircraft's capabilities. Believing this feature to be a clear indication of super maneuverability, American officers thought the aircraft could be the best dogfighter in the world. A year later, after a physical sighting near Israel, a local radar picked up the signal of the new aircraft while accelerating to Mach 3.2, more than 3 times the speed of sound. This puzzled both the local Air Force and the Americans, who were called to see the evidence. Soon, rumors about the aircraft's true capabilities and specifics started circulating, with some saying the type had the most impressive state-of-the-art radar in existence. Suddenly presented with a Soviet fighter that could potentially outrun and outmaneuver anything in the U.S. Air Force arsenal, the MiG-25 became the most feared aircraft in the world. The Paper Tiger. 5 years later, the Japanese government suddenly had a Soviet pilot and the world's most mysterious fighter jet in its hands. The Hakodate airport then became a hive of Western intelligence activity. The aircraft was dismantled and moved by a cargo aircraft to a Japanese Air Force base on September 25th, and top brass invited a large team of U.S. officers and scientists to examine the warplane extensively. Soon, aviation experts inspecting every piece of the aircraft were able to find out the truth about the elusive warplane. Its large radar, once thought to be the latest in the game, was years behind U.S. models. Still, while its elements were outdated, its materials made it virtually jam-proof, a feature that was not available on American radars at the time. Another massive problem was its 2 enormous engines. While each was capable of 11 tons of thrust, enough to break the barrier of sound by 3 times, such speed put considerable pressure on the motors. The scientists soon discovered that when flying above 2,000 miles per hour, the wind's force would be so significant that it would start eating up parts of the engine itself. As such, the Westerners concluded that the MiG tracked by Israel in 1971 at Mach 3.2 was probably destroying its own engines while showing off, and was quite lucky to return safely to base. After a thorough analysis, the Westerners also realized that the MiG-25's capabilities were wildly overestimated, and the most feared aircraft in the world was nothing but a paper tiger. Seeing red. News of Viktor Belenko's defection reached the Soviet Union in no time. In response, the Russian embassy in Tokyo released a fuming statement claiming their right to protect military secrets and demanding that the secret aircraft and the pilot be returned to the motherland. Still, the Japanese ignored all requests, and some officials even shot a few Russians trying to get to the aircraft. Belenko did not return to the USSR and was given American citizenship. In the US, the pilot became an aeronautical engineer and consultant to the Air Force. Once the American intelligence had gathered all the information it wanted about the MiG-25, the aircraft was reassembled and loaded on a boat for its return to Russia, along with a $40,000 bill for shipping costs and runway damage. However, the debt was never paid. Upon the aircraft's arrival, Soviet experts soon discovered the extent of the West's knowledge about the previously classified aircraft. They then noticed some damage to the systems and avionics, including the radar, which had noticeably foreign fuses attached to it. The engineers determined that in addition to running the engines several times, the Westerners had reverse-engineered all the operational equipment. The 1976 incident set off a flurry of Western media publications criticizing the MiG-25, describing the design as rudimentary, engineering archaeology, and flat-out obsolete. Still, the press conveniently hid some of the improved features, including mentioning that the MiG-25 airframe worked perfectly at extremely high temperatures and could be easily and quickly repaired by standard repair personnel. New aircraft. After reverse engineering the MiG-25, the U.S. Air Force embarked on one of its largest and most effective projects, the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. An all-weather tactical fighter that is still in service, this type was built to succeed the MiG-25 in all capacities, including its speed and maneuverability. On the other side of the world, the Soviet government, the Ministry of Defense, and the Ministry of Aircraft Industry also took resolute actions to improve the aircraft, as well as all secrecy protocols. 2.5 years after Belenko's defection, an improved MiG-25 PD entered production, and the Soviet Air Force built 1,000 additional models. Even Sukhoi, Mikoyan's local rival, built the Su-27 series in response to the debacle. But since the MiG-25's concept was still compromised despite the improvements, the Red Armed Forces subsequently developed the MiG-31 interceptor aircraft. A complete realization of the MiG-25's potential, but with more modern capabilities, the MiG-31 entered service a couple of years before the end of the Cold War and remains in service with the Russian Air Force. In contrast to its predecessor, insightful knowledge about the inner workings of the MiG-31 remains close to none. Thanks again to Babbel, one of the world's top language learning apps, for sponsoring this video. Remember, Dark Skies viewers get up to 60% off their Babbel subscription by clicking on the link in the description. Tell us in the comments which language you've wanted to learn more about, but maybe just haven't had the time.